Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and it's been a while since I've done one of these, the best Pokemon game tier list. Pokemon Sword and Shield wasn't even out. I just went, you know what? Pokemon, let's go. S tier, everyone's hating on it for no reason. Actually, let's just talk about them all. But now we've gotten some more games, some of them terrible, some of them pretty good. So let's see how this goes. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like, share with a friends, comment your thoughts down below, and use code VERLISIFY for 20% off your G Fuel order. Unless you're watching in late July, now we got a Christmas in July sale, 30% off, and you can get some fun, cute stuff or some limited edition flavors. If you're watching any other time, G Fuel tastes great. It's the best energy drink I've found. Find a flavor you like, maybe check out the sales. And the sales stack, so you can get 13% off, then 20% off, and then you have G Fuel, and then you're like, yo, G Fuel's great. And I'm not going to start off in order of game releases. I want to talk about the top 5 Pokemon games first, because it also works as a Verlisified top 5 favorite Pokemon games list. And I get to ask that a lot, you know, what's your favorite game? What Pokemon games do you like the most? And we can actually go and put this one in order. So, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, best Pokemon game. It's perfection. Wow, nothing could possibly go wrong. But yeah, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, the perfect Pokemon game. You could tell Game Freak poured everything that is Pokemon into these games. All the games that came before it, everything the franchise has become, and then taking it to make the ultimate peak experience. Pokemon following you and augmenting your adventure. Taking the peak of Gold and Silver, you know, the best games before them, where it's like, wow, 2 regions, an expanded story, expanded exploration. Other than that, it had everything else. The Pokathlon, I grinded the Pokathlon to get all the ranks I could. You have the Safari Zone, which you could customize, and then battle facilities and competitive. It was just, well, not even was. It is just the best Pokemon game in the delivery of the experience, which brings us to Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. I just keep saying, like, these are the second best Pokemon games. And one thing that makes a Pokemon game peak for me is that it's not a game, it's an experience. Because growing up as a kid, there's nothing you wanted more than to live in the Pokemon world and have Pokemon be real. Maybe not for these Zoomers. Maybe not for the kids that grew up on the trash that's Generation 5, that was the methodical destruction of Pokemon. We're going to get to that later in the video. But, you know, like, growing up in the 90s, never experiencing anything like this before in culture, which is why Pokemon took over the world and is still the largest franchise today. You want to get your animal friend, you want to go on an adventure, and you want to become the very best like no one ever was. And the closer we get to that being an experience, as opposed to just playing a game, again, the more peak it is for Pokemon. And the experience of Pokemon Let's Go is incredible, backed up by the best gameplay mechanic ever introduced in the main series, which is catch combos, which just give you access to everything. Oh, you want competitive for IVs? Yeah, just catch. It rewards you. The gameplay loop is so unbelievably satisfying. What's Pokemon about? Catching Pokemon. Not gotta catch them all. Japan, it's called Get Pokemon, which is also where a lot of just nonsense and toxic kids don't understand how Pokemon works. But yeah, you catch Pokemon, and then you get rewards for that, and then the rewards kind of transcend just money and items and stuff. So now you have easy access to competitive Pokemon. The Nature Lady! Oh my god! Almost every Pokemon game has the jaw-dropping surprise factor of, like, how did no one ever consider this ever in Pokemon? Yet someone at Game Freak cooked it up and made it, like, one of the best mechanics ever. So you have the Nature Lady, and then you also have Cerulean Cave, where you can farm super in-game items. You can just pick up a Master Ball off the ground, and then the gym battle replay system's really good. The money system's really good. Everything just means, like, you play Pokemon Let's Go, and you're perfectly rewarded. And then it's also the best game for shiny hunting, because overworld shiny Pokemon finally existed, because we finally got overworld Pokemon. And then with the Pokemon Go catching, like, how does anyone think that detracts from the game? Because if you're just out doing wild encounters or even overworld encounters that keep, like, running into you, it's more of an inconvenience than anything. And you either run away, you throw a quick ball and auto catch it, or you have, like, a false swipe Pokemon, you get it down to 1 health by just, like, trivializing the fight, and then you catch it anyways, or you just, like, one-shot it. So there's nothing taken away by doing the Let's Go mechanic. It also unlocks a lot of extra gameplay and rewards with better catch rate and more experience and stuff. And competitive was actually some of the most fun I've ever had playing competitive Pokemon, because, oh, no power creep from overtuned abilities and then just everyone spamming stupid items? Yeah, cool. Like, it just came out in its own form of perfection. Best Nintendo Switch Pokemon game, which is also like, come on, Game Freak. Why did you fumble the ball by making the worst possible game and not extending the franchise? There's an interview with Junichi Masuda where someone's like, hey, are we going to see a Let's Go sequel? He said, yeah, if Pokemon Let's Go does well, it's definitely on the cards, and Pokemon Let's Go did very well. And yet, somehow, we didn't get Pokemon Let's Go Heart Gold Soul Silver, which would have been the best Pokemon games forever and ever. What if we turned Kanto into just all wild area or the Safari Zone with more customization? Shit makes me sad. But then we see the young generation new wave corporate takeover kind of oust Junichi Masuda and put him into a fellow, what was it called? A special fellow role. So yeah, you have Morimoto direct the best Pokemon game, you have Masuda direct the second best Pokemon game. Wow, it's almost like the people that started Pokemon know exactly how to give the ultimate Pokemon experience. Crazy. And I could keep talking about Pokemon Let's Go, but let's go into the next one. Third place, Pokemon Sword and Shield with DLC. Because again, it's like, wow, the incredible gameplay loop of you go out into your open area, and then you can catch all the Pokemon or interact with that, or find the rare spawns, pick up items off the ground. You can just interact in the wild area and have all kinds of fun. You go into the dens, you get rewards from the dens, you convert the sparks, and then you can also find more items with the digging duo. Before you know it, you got all the money you need to be competitive, and then introducing insane quality of life. Vitamins to max EVs. Like, I feel like I was the only person that went crazy, or like at least the only creator, because actual real Pokemon fans, which you can't find in anyone else's audiences as a Poketuber, you know, people that actually play the game, which is only like 5% of the Pokemon quote-unquote community at this point, they understood, like, wait a second, that's like the greatest, biggest major feature. Why is this like not 24/7 news until the game releases? This is the only thing we talk about, kind of crazy. And then with the DLC, it's like, oh, all of that just got better. You get more rewards with Armorite, you get more gameplay conversion, you get more opportunities and exploration, and then the Cramomatic. We have crafting in Pokemon, and it's like an alchemy system, so you can convert everything into exactly what you want. Easy competitive access. Oh wait, everyone's hacking. Fuck the Pokemon community. And then it's really weird with Pokemon Let's Go and Pokemon Sword and Shield, because I've been covering the hate and toxicity and just permanent negativity of the Pokemon community for over a decade now, and it's just default. It's just Game Freak, bad, NPC, flavor of the month, whatever. Almost all of the Pokemon community has become fake and unwell. You don't like one of the best Pokemon games ever because of a tree texture, which isn't even present in most of the game. You can also look at the other trees inside the game, and if you compare these textures inside of Pokemon Sword and Shield to to Legends of Breath of the Wild, oh, Breath of the Wild has lower quality textures. No one got mad of that. So the Pokemon community only knows how to hate and be toxic. And then the National Dex, which also has its own hypocrisy. National Dex, no, it's good. We must bring back the National Dex. Oh, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, National Dex bad. It must be removed, or because of Pokemon accessibility or something. It's not fair that I have to play Pokemon games to compete in competitive Pokemon to earn tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, just like insane amounts of hypocrisy. But now I'm also seeing more and more threads of people saying, you know what, Pokemon Sword and Shield was good. Actually, great games, really. Which is just another thing about just social media giving everyone brain rot and NPC culture, that eventually you always flip on what the popular opinion was. Bad when it came out, good now. Bad when it came out, oh, maybe we were too hard on it. That's because these cretins have absolutely no personality of their own, and to be special, they need to go against the flow. And then they blame me on that because now they're projecting their worthlessness, and the Pokemon community is a mess. But yeah, top 3, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Let's Go, Sword and Shield with DLC, can't beat it. But now, here's where I'm like at odds, because we have open world Pokemon with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It might just be community health, because now the community is just going downhill, it gets worse and worse and worse, and feels worse and worse and worse, and the game didn't even last until December. And that's the upsetting thing about making Pokemon videos for over a decade, and objectively being the biggest Pokemon fan and most passionate Pokemon fan out of every Poketuber, is watching the decline of the longevity of Pokemon. Because like Pokemon X and Y came out, by the way, A tier, and I was surprised. It's like, what do you mean it's March and people are starting to lose interest in Pokemon games? Now, like, April, always dead, and I guess nothing can really save that. But then we got the announcement for Omega Ruby Now Sapphire. Wait, Pokemon came back? People splashed back into Pokemon X and Y. So, like, it lasted a while, but it felt kind of short. It's like, wait, what do you mean people weren't playing this game all year the entire year. And then, oh, by January, not as many people cared about Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Pokemon Sun and Moon, that was dead by the end of December. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet didn't even make it to December. Barely made it to like the first battle season. And then you go and play ranked with the most accessible competitive Pokemon, even with all like the hacking and stuff. Like, oh wait, with all the hackers and VGC and everyone cheating in the West anyways, they're not even going on the battle stadium because they're that trash at the game. And then you look at people like, oh, but everyone's playing Pokemon Showdown. Pokemon Showdown is like 2,000 active battles. And most of those aren't even like actual competitive formats. So just no one played any form of Pokemon in Generation 9, and 98% of the people that did were cheating. And then you go on the battle stadium and it's like 97% Asian players and like 90% Japanese players doing like crazy stuff and just making you feel sad for their crazy strategies and stuff. So that's why I'm like, where does that put Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? Because the game and the experience of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we have great shiny hunting, we have great exploration, we have a story that was so moving and powerful that came out of nowhere, great music, great gameplay loop, battle mechanics, and then being able to buy mints. What? Buying PP ups, being able to get hyper training at level 50 instead of level 100. Like, level 100 was doable under Pokemon Sword and Shield. 50, it's free. You have absolutely no excuse to complain about anything competitive Pokemon ever, and yet these brats, they just get more and more entitled, and it's insane. That kind of goes back to like, oh wait, in Generation 5, yeah, of course, a full shiny team was hacking. In Generation 6 and Generation 7, a full shiny team was hacking because people won't even take the time it takes now to make a non-shiny competitive team. And we also saw with the Team Peak at the end of Pokemon Sword and Shield battles, oh, everyone has hacked Pokemon anyways. So like, yeah, oh, wait a second, cheaters are dishonest and they're saying, nuh-uh, we're not cheating. Who would have guessed? So like, the game itself has more and so much more to do, and the expansion of it is so powerful. But the best 3DS Pokemon games with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire also having tons of mechanics. You have the Mirage Islands, you build out your base, you can also invite people to your base, maybe they give you a Master Ball, catch all the legendary Pokemon, Battle Facility was great, and then you just play. And then you have also just tons of interactions and different ways of getting competitive Pokemon. We had the daycare loop, we had a really good system for the tutor moves. Like, this has to be tied for 4th, right? Because if the community just hasn't rotten into the most polluted sludge ever, because people still cared about Pokemon here. People were passionate to play and learn, and that was just kind of like riding off Pokemon X and Y, where everyone got back into Pokemon X and Y. Even though it took like 10 times longer to get competitive Pokemon X and Y than it does now, people are like, you know what? I'm going to pick up breeding. I want to learn these mechanics. I'm going to try EV training. Oh, the hordes, like the Pokemon hordes, that makes EV training accessible and all that fun stuff. Even though super training sucked and was like the worst EV training, it takes longer, but I mean, as long as it gets someone into playing competitive Pokemon, yeah, then I guess, like, so people spent more time, they did it. And then that followed into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. This was the perfect duo, where it's like everyone gets back into Pokemon after the absolute trash heap that is Generation 5 that made everyone feel like they weren't Pokemon fans anymore. They get back in, it was the Renaissance, and then you go into Gen 3 remakes. Everyone loved Gen 3. Everyone loved their Emerald version back in the day. Everyone's happy now. And then Sun and Moon, like, at least for the leak season and the hype going to Sun and Moon, it was a great couple of years, wasn't it? So that's what I mean. But, like, so we had more community engagement making these games feel better. We have a worse community making these games feel worse. Imagine the passion of Pokemon X and Y with the mechanics and accessibility of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The games are just do so much and are so great. Yeah, and everything else, like, you can do so much with these games, and it's just really nice. So we got that out of the way. Let's hop back down to the bottom now. So we got top 5, splashed in a little bit of teaser hee, and now let's talk about the worst games. Now, when it comes to talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Black and White, I already have videos breaking down how these are indefensibly the worst Pokemon games. So if you want the deep dive that proves you wrong because I just offended you, go and check those out. We have like over an hour of just kind of like showing how I was actually correct about everything with Pokemon Legends Arceus. The biggest Verlicify always right until Pokemon Worlds 2023, where everyone got DQ'd, and then also Wolf getting caught cheating multiple times with data mining. So like, you know, there's infinity Verlicify always rights, but this was a pretty solid one because I read the website and everyone went, ew, that means Pokemon Legends would be bad. Pokemon Legends could never be bad. You're wrong, Verlisify, because you read the website. And then the game comes out, it's like, oh wait, it's actually worse than all the official things told us about. Weird, and no one can cope. So yeah, there's nothing to be saved here. The gameplay loop sucks. It just retcons already existing lore because we have Sinnoh folklore, which is weird because we had Brilliant Diamond Shine Pearl come out, and that's going to remind us of Sinnoh folklore and all that other stuff. Hisui didn't exist. There's no such thing as Hisui. All the new Pokemon well, not all. There's a couple of all right ones, but you know, like 90% of the new Pokemon designs are awful, and it's the same destruction of Pokemon that we saw with Black and White, which is also the video topic that proves Pokemon Black and White are the worst games. And then the Gen Whiners and toxic modern Pokemon fans, they just have no respect for what came before them. That's also kind of a trend that we see with younger generations, and now narcissism getting kicked up to an extreme with social media, trying to kick out the old guard, trying to think that their new shitty ideas are better than what came before. Even though if Pokemon Red and Blue were bad games, Pokemon would never have become any of this. It would have never grown to what it is today. It would have fallen to the wayside. It would have been a joke. No one would have cared about it, and then it would have never gotten the resources and support to build into anything. Calling the shittest Pokemon game shit got you hit with the original straw man of our generation, which makes things like really weird to think about. The biggest straw man of the early internet era, but we were just kids playing Pokemon, so we didn't know about fallacies. We didn't know like ad hominem and straw man. We just went, oh no, these kids are just stupid kids because I'm not a Gen 1er. I like every other Pokemon game but Gen 5, so you're just lying. And another thing I've been talking about on the channel for over a decade is like, oh, this is just a bad sign of things to come, that it's not going to get any better, it's only going to get worse. That somehow, because like Pokemon is so large, you see what's going on in the Pokemon community with the derangement, with the deliberate lying, with the toxicity. It's like, wait, that's going to spill out into society, and you can actually see where society is headed through like internet subcultures, and Pokemon being one of the worst, most toxic, most deranged internet cultures. Like, oh, that's bad, and then you can watch it kind of funnel out. So the OG strawman, a Gen 1er, has never ever existed. There is no person that only fixates on Gen 1 and finds anything outside of Gen 1 bad, because you're going to find that they like Generation 2. You're going to find that they like a Pokemon from Generation 3, or they played another Pokemon game. But to defend trash that for some reason it's one of those things where people get married to their ideas, or the first thing they experience is the best, and now it's like, well, that's my thing now, and I'm unchanging, and I can never change my opinion, or I can never accept anyone else's view of anything else because this is my cult. The Gen 5 cult is weird, man, and that goes into my other video where I talked about how Pokemon Black and White is the methodical destruction of Pokemon, and it makes a lot of sense when it's put into that light. Oh, you're not allowed to play with any of the new Pokemon. You're forced into this experience, and then everything just kind of feels like a knockoff Pokemon, and it was actually a reboot. That it was designed to be a reboot because Game Freak didn't have faith in the older audiences. Fortunately, we've seen a reversal on that, where there's more of an embracing of the older Pokemon fans, and we get better games. But this was like, Game Freak got lost, the new generation seeded some insecurity, they lost themselves, they lost what Pokemon was about, and then we just had a terrible generation because of it. And then kids with no understanding of how incredible the foundation of Pokemon is got into that. And then we have the first Zoomer Zillennial Pokemon game, and it's like, oh wow, all these entitled brats are already just coming in and ruining everything. And it was just an omen of what was to come. And then also the death of critical thinking skills, where people say, oh, Pokemon Red and Blue didn't have a story. What do you mean the game about a Yakuza mob boss doesn't have a story, but the most tropey, shallow thing about, oh, we have a PETA organization, and we also have a special child trope, that's a deeper story? No. Objectively, no. And also, this further shows the methodical destruction of Pokemon. This story doesn't need to exist, because if you care about Pokemon and you love Pokemon, there is nothing to question about being a Pokemon trainer. That's why, like, what makes these games F tier is these are anti-Pokemon games. They have no respect for Pokemon, and then they don't even create anything good from trying to revamp Pokemon. And Pokemon Black and White is even more of that, with less reason to play. This is the only main series Pokemon game I've picked up and haven't been able to finish, because, like, what's the point? This was trash, and now I have to relive trash. Nah. And then I got distracted by the rant and didn't make one of the biggest points, but Pokemon's health is determined by the community. If the community is doing great, the quality of the game doesn't matter. And the quality of the game doesn't really impact how the community should feel about it because there are no bad Pokemon games except for Legends Arceus and Generation 5. You remove the entitlement, the hypocrisy, the cheating, and you have enough core of a Pokemon game to make anything work in a very playable, very replayable, very competitive level. So if the community didn't suck, there's no reason to not have any game at any point just have a crazy amount of players and engagement. But we don't have that because it's all fake. It's all about cheating your Nuzlocke and removing the challenge, hacking your game, faking challenges, rigging content, playing crappy ROM hacks and stuff. Like, there's enough to Pokemon where just stay in the official realm, actually engage with the mechanics, play the freaking game, and then Pokemon's doing great. But no, we can't have that these days because everyone's fraudulent. Okay, so now we can finally talk about Pokemon games and how they rank. Generation 1 has to be A+ tier, and much like Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, these games only get better with time as we understand them more and really see their potential. Also, the Virtual Console making people like come back in the games and having more accessibility with them because, oh, you can just trade between Generation 1 and Generation 2 on your DS with the time machine. That is such an incredible feature and really shows what we can do with these games. Shiny hunting exists in Generation 1. That is my #1 most favorite piece of Pokemon trivia. So like, oh, there's already more gameplay to be unlocked inside of this. They also did not restrict the glitches. You can actually do the Missing No glitch and then transfer out of Pokemon Red and Blue, which shows that that's not seen as cheating or illegitimate actions of the game. And then you can do all kinds of wild shit. You can catch a shiny Pokemon Generation 2, put it back into Generation 1, give it Mimic, Ditto glitch, take that shiny Ditto, put it back into Generation 2, 1 in 64 breeding odds. So like the compliments of the game, also pretty crazy. But then because of that, you know, just Gold and Silver version, better than Red and Blue, because like, oh, it's Red and Blue with another region, and then a little bit of extra gameplay on top and all kinds of fun stuff. Also, another thing slept on about Pokemon Red and Blue version is this game gave us the most open exploration of a region until we got the true open world Pokemon game. You can do some wacky shit with this. You go Brock, Misty, Koga, Blaine, Sabrina, Erica, Surge, Giovanni. That is how open Kanto is in the original Pokemon games. No restriction equals better. You also have a little bit of gym order flexibility with Gold and Silver version, but yeah, like also day-night coming in and all the other mechanics added. So Game Boy era A+ tier, and then we have however you feel about the other games. Some people put Yellow over Red and Blue. Crystal is just more and better and has like the sprite animations. So that's like when we get into the sequel versions of the games where my grading does get a little weird, and that was something people had a lot of disagreement with for my last video where I put Platinum version under Diamond and Pearl. And that's because of two reasons. One, I don't like replaying games because it just feels like a waste of time to go through 90% of the same experience instead of just like building more competitive Pokemon or getting more resources or getting more progression and depth out of the original game. So it has to bring a lot for me to want to put it over. Like, well, if I just play Red and Blue, what's the incentive to playing Yellow version? Or if I'm just playing Diamond and Pearl, what's the incentive to playing Platinum version? So while there might be more to the games and they are a direct upgrade, if it's not enough of an upgrade to kind of beat the originals, because you also have to see this in maybe a time frame perspective that, okay, Diamond and Pearl comes out. I play Diamond and Pearl. If I'm enjoying Diamond and Pearl so much, I don't want to, again, redo most of the experience, even if they do change the story or they do different mechanics and legendaries. Like, what's the point? Unless it, like, brings so much that I have to engage with this experience, which is also why Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is reason number 2 as to why I don't rank some of these other games as highly, because Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon is just the peak of Generation 7. Pokemon Sun and Moon walked, so Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon could drag race, and probably to the detriment of the entire Pokemon franchise. Because with all the hype going into Pokemon Sun and Moon, millions of views on trailer releases like we've never seen before, non-stop trailers, this was the best. Like, this is S++++, we'll never see hype like we saw going into Pokemon Sun and Moon, but then the games came out. And while there was a lot of cool stuff to the games, kind of also fell because of what happened with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Well, everyone's just hacking and cheating at this point, because we've now had multiple years of the Nintendo 3DS, and no one has time to do what they did in X and Y and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire in a new generation for the 5th time. So it's like, they didn't, like, all the gameplay mechanics, like, there's still great competitive quality of life. I got so deep into content on this game, and I was having a great time, but for most people, they weren't having it. So they played a little bit, and they were done, despite the 15 million sales or whatever, like the absolute record-shattering that we saw. But because of that, they were just like, well, I'm burned out, so why is this game going to be better? Generation 7's whatever. I'm probably just quitting Pokemon again anyways, because I played too much, I'm burned out. Also, the community is getting really toxic and cheat-filled, so my work means nothing. Even though, like, the mechanics and what you could do with these games also peak. Like, S tier, if you just go back to my Generation 7 guides and stuff. But the games themselves felt off and lacking in kind of a weird way. And then, like, maybe this is a B tier game, but just the statement and how much came out with Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. It's like, no, this is trash, actually. But not as bad as actual trash games. So it's like, yeah, no reason to ever pick this game up. No reason to ever play it. This is just the definitive Generation 7 Pokemon game. And A tier isn't really listed in order of best, because that's kind of impossible. Like, all these games are equally good for their own merits and reasons. It's really just the 1 through 5 that you could quantify. And then the rest of the Pokemon games are just B tier to me. And I know people are going to have disagreements like, no way, Fire Red and Leaf Green are way better than Pokemon Red and Blue version. But that's kind of the same thing as Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Fire Red and Leaf Green don't even hold a candle to what Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and Heart Gold Soul Silver bring to the original games. And then with just playing the original games first, there's a lot more, like, cool ways you push the jank and experience Pokemon Red and Blue compared to Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green. I think Ruby Sapphire I definitely put like 2,000 hours into these games as a kid, but also there wasn't really too much else to do in 2003 when you had like a Game Boy and your friend had the GameCube and you had a Nintendo 64 and all that stuff. So like, this was the solo player game. This was the only thing I was playing by myself. This was also one of the rare times where I bought both versions of the game so I could fill out the decks all by myself, because, like, again, there was nothing else playing. That was before I even got competitive. What else do you do as a kid in the early 2000s with these games? You just play it and you become and absorb everything Pokemon until the next experience. And then I went super hard competitive, and then like Diamond Pearl launched that, and everything else happened from there. And then also people are going to be like, no way, Emerald version definitely A tier because it did so much more and was so much better. But at the same time, like, I didn't see a reason to playing Emerald more than Pokemon Ruby Sapphire version. And the Battle Frontier is one of the most overrated things ever in Pokemon. It hasn't come back because no one played it. Especially as a competitive player, I just need the Battle Tower. I don't need to worry about other gimmicks. I want to make my competitive Pokemon, test them into the Battle Tower, make it as far as I can, and then make my Pokemon stronger with the rewards from the Battle Tower. Fun gameplay loop. Having to do all the other weird things. Sure, there's more content and features, but like less than 1% of players actually engage with it. Game Freak said something like that in an interview, which is why we didn't get the Battle Frontier in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. So it's like, yeah, it's just stuff that some people played, but it wasn't like a totality of the game. Also, as a kid, you don't have $40 for Emerald anymore. If you wanted to get a used copy of Ruby Sapphire, because everyone held Emerald in such a high regard, that was like $10-15. Emerald only went up in price. It was like $50. What do you mean a Pokemon game goes up in price after the new generation comes out? That's absurd and doesn't make any sense. But I guess having access to like more Pokemon and like more stuff to do, and then you go into the DS, and then that helps with the transfer into Generation 4, like, yeah. Oh, and I guess I am discounting the power of tutors on the direct remake games, where it's like, yes, there's more content here, the games are better, and I guess Emerald does more to Ruby and Sapphire than what Platinum does to Diamond and Pearl. It's like, is it A-? Like, where do I strike that balance? Am I out of touch, or is it the people that are wrong? And with everything else in the Pokemon community, it's the people that are wrong, but maybe not with Emerald. Like, I could see the case where maybe not with Emerald. Like, A-, and if I have to choose, like, a best A tier game, I can't. Because, like, the revitalization of Pokemon from X and Y, and then just everyone going hard and heavy and shiny hunting and breeding for the first time and learning competitive Pokemon and wanting to know that an IV and an EV is different than a Vaporeon. And this is before the realization that in terms of male human and female Pokemon breeding, Vaporeon is the most compatible. So it was just a simpler time, right? Yeah, like, I wish A tier was easier, because it's really hard. I think for definitively, we can say Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, not as good as Gold and Silver. Like, see, at some point you do have to wonder where the nostalgia goggles are, but man, these two games were on the same thing. We have Virtual Console with interaction, and then we also just have Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Eventually you do run out of stuff to do in Pokemon Red and Blue, I feel. And in the same way, you do run out of stuff to do in Gold and Silver. And then, like, the competitive for Generation 7 was ugly, but there was definitely competitive there. All the tiers feel right, but if we're talking about something as huge as Pokemon, I almost want the order to be correct at a glance as well. I think, like, this feels correct. This feels correct. Maybe your mind just kind of, like, your brain fills that in however you want. This feels correct. Didn't talk much about Brilliant Diamond Shine Pearl. Again, like, the community just hated falling back into less quality of life. But I do have some gripes with this game where, like, as I was playing, I was like, oh, they could have done that. The removal of the cool stuff about secret bases, I'm not a fan. Again, like, the hindrance of the quality of life. I liked my grinding, I liked my competitive, I like earning my things. But for modern times where it's like, well, I could go out and play Minecraft or League of Legends, like, now the competition means you have to do something to reward time a bit more. And I'm still upset that they didn't do Overworld Shiny Pokemon with the Underground feature. Like, if you have Overworld Pokemon, they must be shiny. Like, that is a huge fault of Pokemon X and Y. That is something that makes me dock like 1.5 points, just that feature alone, off of Brilliant Diamond Shine Pearl. But the rest of Brilliant Diamond Shine Pearl is pretty hype. Yeah, it's actually just better Diamond and Pearl. So there we go. That is the definitive, objective, best Pokemon games list, pretty much in order. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.